proceed. What have you been up to?
Now, Mr. Attorney General, this particular provision sounds unconstitutional. But why were there not consultations before moving forward with the proposals? Did they say what will happen when you guys get to St. Vincent? Because there are pressing socio-economic issues that I would want to address with you. In the hyper-information age of social media, the Bubb Report knows there is more to the story. We have questions and demand answers. We strive to hold the powerful accountable and tell an unbiased, contextual story. You know what happened. We'll let you know why it happened. There is always more to the story. The Bubb Report, streaming every Sunday at 11 a.m. on Facebook and YouTube.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenadas.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not favorable? You don't know the terms.
We love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean.
If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm going to live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? You said
Torchlight Independent Media presents Grenadas' only source for independent, unbiased, and well-researched broadcast journalism. This is the Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb.
hello and welcome to the December 5th edition of the Bubb Report. Last week, the Eastern Caribbean island of Barbados took its historic place as the world's 160th republic, bringing the symbolic and constitutional curtains down on the last vestige of the oppressive era of colonialism on the island. Barbados, before November 30th, was a parliamentary democracy in which the unelected Queen of England was the country's head of state, even though the island gained its independence in 1966. The island, which was nicknamed as Little England, has the historic designation of being the birthplace of British slave society and the most ruthlessly colonized of all of the British colonies in the Caribbean because of the high death rate of the enslaved Africans, and its role in cementing Britain's place as an imperial superpower. The significance and gravity of last week's event was put into context by the island's progressive Prime Minister, Mia Mottley.
It's not enough to be pause, to be whole, to be void, to be silent, to be semicolon, to be semi-colony. In those words, Kamau recognized that just going part of the distance to freedom, part of the distance to independence, was not enough. I am grateful that the children of independence agree with Kamau Brathwaite.
The historic celebration of Barbados' newfound constitutional status was witnessed by Prince Charles, who represented his aging mother, and witnessed for the very last time the lowering of the Queen's royal standard and the swearing in of Dame Sandra Mason as the island's first president.
I, Sandra Prunella Mason, do swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Barbados according to law, so help me God.
Over in Grenada, the budget debate in the country's lower house of parliament went underway, with an opening salvo from the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Tobias Clement, who critiqued the estimates of revenue and expenditure for its inability to implement the grant proposals articulated by Finance Minister Gregory Bowen, but was also quick to compliment the government for doling out a series of tax relief and stimulus packages.
It says here, the capital expenditure performance, local revenue 25 million, grants 195.4 million, loans 41.3 million. That out of that $195 million grant, it says the National Transformation Fund contributed $152 million. Since when we call in the National Transformation Fund grants? I have looked through several budget documents, and most grants I see come from outside sources, but here the government of Grenada is giving itself a grant.
Outside of the walls of the country's parliament, the newly minted political leader of the National Democratic Congress, who came under heavy scrutiny and criticism by at least 4 government MPs, including the Prime Minister, also had his say on the estimates of revenue and expenditure, taking a dim view of some of the policy proposals advanced.
So, citizens of Grenada, after all of us have made the shared sacrifice under the Structural Adjustment Program, and have gone through the shared sacrifices of coping with lockdowns, job losses, restrictions on our freedom of movement, the closure of businesses, if the budget was meant to position us to come out stronger as a result of COVID-19, it is not doing so.
On today's program, we continue the conversation started last Sunday, November 28th, about the potential impacts, implications, and outcomes of the just concluded budget debate in the lower house, which is now going before the upper house of Parliament for further debate before final passage and approval. We welcome our guest, the Member of Parliament for St. Patrick West and economist the Honourable Anthony Boson, public policy consultant Dr. Stephen Fletcher, social activist and communications professional Alex Downs, public relations officer of the Grenada Public Workers Union Daisy Hazard, and economist Lennox Andrews. We thank you for joining us. Good morning, everyone, and let me first of all apologize for the very late start that has happened to the Bubb Report today. We've had some serious connectivity issues, and when technology fails, it really fails. So we thank you for joining us, and thank you for your patience as we attempted to work through those kinks. And of course, for this week's editorial, we want to focus and turn our attention to Barbados. Last Monday, the government over there hosted a grand party to celebrate its constitutional transition to the status of republic. What the island of 287,000 people did last week has provoked significant chatter around the globe about the role of the unelected, taxpayer-subsidized hereditary monarchy as the head of state of post-colonial societies. The respectability politics class in countries that still maintain the Queen as the head of state would tell you that they are happy with their colonized forms of government, because many still believe, for example, that Christopher Columbus's genocidal invasion and illegal settlement of the Western Hemisphere and the subsequent enterprise of slavery was a good civilizing influence for the uncultured and uncivilized African and indigenous people who were subjected to their oppression. Let us hope that Barbados's bold move would influence similar change in the English-speaking Caribbean, where the colonial powers managed to successfully create local elites of African descent who think and act like Europeans that have Western interests at heart. The challenge we face in the region is that when it comes to the people who hold positions of power, only a change of skin color and status is not enough. Successful decolonization must also take into account the personal and the national consciousness, as well as because, according to Pavan Varma, quote, the cultural and intellectual consequences of colonialism do not end with the attainment of political freedom, unquote. And on this note, I wish to welcome my panel for this morning's program. Of course, let me apologize because we were supposed to have our guest from Barbados, and it's interesting that Barbados has a power outage at this time, which precludes him from having access to the internet that is needed for his appearance on the program today. But at this time, I wish to welcome my panel from Grenada, who will be discussing and having a conversation on the just concluded budget debate in the lower house of parliament. Of course, as we know, the budget debate moves to the upper house of parliament in the Senate, where debate continues next week. So let me welcome at this time Dr. Stephen Fletcher, who is representing the interagency group of civil society organizations. The Honorable Anthony Boson, he is the Member of Parliament for St. Patrick West, a former Minister of Finance, as well as an economist. We also have Mr. Lennox Andrew here in his capacity as an economist, but he's also a card-carrying member of the opposition National Democratic Congress. And Ms. Daisy Hazard, who is the Public Relations Officer of the Grenada Public Workers Union. And Daisy, I want to begin with you this morning. And I want to begin with you because I suppose you would say that the measures outlined in the budget for public sector workers were adequate, given the state of the Grenadian economy. After all, some are suggesting that the Santa Claus in the budget specifically references the workers of the union that you represent. Daisy, what are your thoughts?
Good morning, Dr. Bubb. Good morning to my fellow panelists and to your viewers and listeners in Grenada and around the world. I'm very happy to be here this morning representing the union and to speak on the aspects of the budget which really concerns and affect our workers directly. Now, you know, some persons are billing the budget, as you rightly say, as a Santa Claus budget. And I know that we're due to receive our 4% increases in January. That is not a gift. It's not even a further emolument. So there's really no packaging there for us as a gift. It's a negotiated increase. We negotiated a 3-year cycle, 20 to 21, 22. And so that 4% increase should come in January. So it's not a gift by any stretch of the imagination. It's not an addition to the budget. It is something that should have been budgeted and forecasted for 3 years ago when it was negotiated. And government do increase, by and large, do increase public sector wages generally every year. Now, the percentage increase is only 4%. And at the time when it was negotiated, we calculated and looked ahead to see what might have been the likely inflation in the society in prices, 3 years hence, 2022. And what we can see now is that substantially, the cost of living in Grenada has gone up tremendously. And so that 4% increase is going to be very difficult for workers to even begin to face the cost of living, even with that 4%. But it's by no means something extraordinary. It was planned, it was forecasted, it was projected. We are very happy, though, that we would not have to fight the government to receive it. And we hope that we would not have to fight the government to receive it, because the fact that it's been spoken about in the budget and it is there does not mean that come January 2022, government may not say, hey, there is a situation. This happened last year, as we saw when the pandemic started, and government said they couldn't pay at the beginning of January 2021. And we saw the ensuing months of struggle that the unions had to engage in so that workers could receive that 4%. So we do hope that workers can receive that money in January as laid out in the budget. It is by no means a gift. It is not a further emolument. It is just a very little, a very, very small negotiated pay increase. Now,
but Daisy, let me push back here a little bit. As you said in your response, we are in a pandemic, right? And certainly, one might say that the government of Grenada, the state, was able to still meet its commitment, notwithstanding these extenuating socioeconomic circumstances that the international community is confronted with. So, how do you respond to the narrative that perhaps, yes, the government is doing what they have to do, but given the context of the socioeconomic situation, they were not obligated to? What are your thoughts?
We do have to be mindful of the prevailing circumstances because they are there. With the rest of the world, we have been dealing with and struggling with the pandemic. But Dr. Bob, all of us as Grenadians have made sacrifices, whether we're in the public sector, whether we're self-employed, and whether we are with the government. But what we do know is that the persons in our country who are directly responsible for literally bailing out our country out of this pandemic are public servants. And we can go into healthcare, we can go into our immigration and customs officials, we can go into our ICT workers who had to rapidly respond and put government services online so that government could continue to collect revenues. We can speak about our workers at the Inland Revenue Department who had to improvise and find creative ways so that business could go on in the society, so that international business could happen. All of that happened because of government workers. And so the question would be, while you have these same workers taking night and making day and finding creative ways so that governments could still continue to do business and still continue to run our country efficiently, can we then turn around and say, well, there is a pandemic and we are squeezed, and so we cannot, the same persons who would have made the sacrifices and found the ways, improvise the ways for our government to continue running and our country to continue running, even in the state of a pandemic, can we then say, no, we can't afford to pay you anything? And I think the answer to that is no. And I think that government making that ensuring that it's budgeted for and it's there in the budget, I think that's the best thing that government could have done. And we are very happy that we do not have to struggle for that money come January 22.
Well, perhaps we might not be seeing more industrial action next year if government does in fact deliver on those promises that you articulated. But at this point, I wish to welcome Dr. Stephen Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher, welcome back to the Bubb Report. We normally love to have you on the program at this time of year to discuss these socioeconomic issues. But has the grouping of civil society organizations, Dr. Fletcher, had the chance to review the estimates of revenue and expenditure? If you were to score the budget on the matrices of tax relief, poverty alleviation, and measures to reduce runaway inflation in the country, in the midst of a pandemic, what grade would you give it?
Hi, Dr. Bubb. Let me thank you for inviting us to be part of this very useful discussion. I also want to recognize at the outset my colleague panelists, Minister Boson, certainly Ms. Hazard from the trade union, Mr. Lennox Andrews, economist. So let me also quickly say to your listeners and viewers, wherever they are, a good welcome to sunshine Grenada. A little bit cloudy and overcast, but certainly happy to be here. Mr. Bubb, on the issue of the budget, let me say this, that the IAGDO has not yet had an opportunity as a collective to discuss the budget and to derive a collective position. So let me put that up there first and foremost. However, in order to adequately address your question, we must put it in context, Grenada and its current fiscal issues in context. We must appreciate the fact that the country is a small island developing state that is extremely vulnerable to external shocks in particular and climatic changes. That puts the government in and we can go into those deeper later on, but that puts the government into a very tight fiscal space. There's not much fiscal maneuvering that could be done given the times that we are in, the fundamental characteristic of a small island state, plus the pandemic that we're experiencing. And therefore, given that, and given the experiences of the last year of the impact that the pandemic had on revenues of the country and so forth, that is based on the way the economy is structured, which is outward-looking, tourism-based, heavily dependent on tourism sector, we would be a bit concerned of the following. I've got to put it, the issue of sustainability of some of the measures. And let me hasten to add that some of the measures are relatively good measures, right? At the outset, they're pretty good measures. Issues to deal with the cost of living with the various elements of it are relatively good. The social programs, the budgeting for the social programs and so on. The question for us, though, would be as follows. Does it go far enough? Is it sufficient, even within the fiscal space that we have? Does it go far enough in the critical areas? And therefore, would there be better to deal with it in terms of the coordination and the congruence of the policies? Because we are seeing some gaps in that area. The other issue that would concern us very much is the question of social and economic justice, the issue of equity within the budgetary system, and whereas some of these measures are pretty good as announced, how it's going to be implemented, right? Implementation, therefore, is an issue, and we can talk about that later. The issue as well of the COVIDious times that we are living and the impact. Has the budget sufficiently really addressed itself? And in my humble opinion, I don't think that we have looked sufficiently inwardly to develop and to restructure the economy in a real and fundamental way, moving it away, in my view, while holding on to some of the external aspect, i.e. tourism and foreign direct investment, but really structuring it in the short to medium term on a more, medium to longer term, on a more inward-looking policy that is resourced and grounded in the Grenadian reality. So we have to look at that. So the issue of vulnerabilities comes in big time in tourism that we are depending on, the issue of agriculture and that dependency, the issue of climate change. Have we sufficiently, as an island that has spearheaded initiatives on climate change globally, has the budget sufficiently aligned itself to that? We have been speaking quite a lot about the marine economy.
The blue economy.
The blue economy. I call it the marine for various reasons. I will stick marine. Blue economy for general acceptance. Fine. But have we sufficiently aligned our ways in that regard? So in terms of your scoring, I will reserve that scoring.
Yeah, I think you should reserve it because you have not had the chance to completely sit down and really examine the budget. But we will get back to you, Dr. Fletcher. And I want to bring in Mr. Lennox Andrews. Mr. Andrews, welcome back to the report. You were here last year at the conclusion of the last budget debate. So we are grateful to have you back. Now, your political leader, that's the political leader of the National Democratic Congress, newly minted political leader, Deacon Mitchell, he ripped the budget to shreds, quipping, for example, that Grenadians cannot eat concrete, right? Now, they may not be able to eat concrete, as he says, but would you concede that the concrete sector, which is the construction sector, now it accounted for I would say about 22.8% according to the 2020 estimates of revenue and expenditure. Now, 22.8% from construction, that is a significant driver of economic development. And how then do you square that particular data point with the statements made by your political leader? What are your thoughts?
Okay, then. Thank you very much, Kellan, Dr. Kellan, and thanks for the opportunity to be here to represent my party and, of course, myself as an economist. And I also want to recognize my fellow participants in this program. So we hope we can have a very meaningful discussion. But before I go directly to your question, Kellan, there are a few points that I would like to make relative to the budget. One is that the expenditure of 171.7 million paid to WRB to purchase the chairs, that expenditure is no way clearly indicated in the budget, neither in 2020 nor in 2021. In other words, when I look at the budget in detail, I can't find any line item, be it capital or revenue, that suggests that there has been that major expenditure being undertaken by the government in that year. So that's an issue. Secondly, as regards to the question you raised to our labor representative concerning whether or not the workers are well represented in this budget. I don't think so. No, we have to recall that since 2014, the workers of this country have been taking the brunt, I must say, the brunt, why we have all had to undergo adjustment. The workers of this country have been taking the brunt of the adjustment. You recall that the government had implemented a structural adjustment program, and there were two measures taken there with the aim, as they say, to correct some fiscal imbalances, two measures that fell directly on the backs of the workers. One is that the income tax threshold was lowered to 36,000 from 60,000, and a tax of 15% was placed on all workers whose salaries ranges from 36,000 to 60,000 a year. And those above that had to pay 30%. Yeah? You'll also recall that in that very same adjustment program, the property tax went up in 2014 by 25%. The property, land, and building went up in 2014 by 25%, and in 2016 by 50%, all of which contributed to the improved fiscal performance. Now, the point is that these measures are still existing today on the workers' back. They will never relax. And an adjustment program is usually for a period of time. And that once you would have achieved your macroeconomic targets, those adjustment measures should have been relaxed. They were never relaxed, and they continue today. So while the government has been achieving some surpluses and some improved performance, that has been due mainly to the workers of this country. And while everybody, all of us have been affected by the pandemic, yeah, we still see in this budget insufficient attention in the form of relief given to our workers. While relief has been given to other sections of the population, not enough relief, in my view, has been given to the workers of this country. Now, I want to make this point. When you analyze the fiscal performance of the government from 2016 to 2020, two things stand out. One, there has been current account surpluses. Two, there has been overall surpluses. Yeah, in fact,
which is a good thing. Yes, if you're talking surpluses.
Yes, which is a good thing. Yeah, but I'm coming to the point. It's a good thing.
Okay, let's hear. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm coming to the point. It's a good thing. In fact, in 2018, the government had an overall surplus of $199.6 million. Yeah. So and in 2021, when you look at the fiscal performance, the government has been receiving more revenues than it has been budgeted for. So while the government has been saying to people you don't have money and it can't pay the workers, and it made the workers march up and down the street in the hot sun and in the rain for their 4%, the truth is that the fiscal performance was such that the government was in a position to pay the workers those monies and to also provide much better care and attention to the population during the pandemic. Now I'll tell you, I'll go further. It's the first time since 2013, that the government has issued a budget that I consider to be complete. Let me explain. A budget has three parts. It has revenue, that's one part. It has expenditure, the second part, and it has a third part called financing. If you go back to all the budgets from 2013 up to 2020, the financing part has been omitted. So in 2022, it's the first time we have seen that financing part being included. And that financing part is the very important part of the budget that tells us the real strength of the fiscal situation of the country, the real strength. Yeah? Though I must admit, while an attempt was made to do it in 2020 for 2022, and if you look at the estimates of revenue expenditure, you will see it, right? On Roman numerals 5, you will see there. Good. While an attempt was made to do it, I must admit it was not done technically correct in some cases, right? In some parts. Good. But strikingly, what it revealed was that the government had reserves of $83.6 million that it is now using to incur expenditure, to finance expenditure. Yeah? So while the government is saying you don't have no fiscal space, there was fiscal space. In fact, your fiscal space would not interfere with your undertaking of basic recurrent expenditure. Yeah? The fiscal space cannot prevent you from paying salaries because those have to be paid. In fact, salaries has first claim on government resources. Yeah? So to say that the government performance was bad and that they didn't have money to pay the teachers, that is not correct. The government had money to pay the teachers.
Okay, so let us invite here the Honorable Anthony Boson. Mr. Boson, can you hear me, sir?
I am hearing you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Well, no, thank you. Thank you for, agreeing to appear on the program today. Now, Mr. Boson, Laurel Bain, a Grenadian economist, citing the IMF Article 5 report of July 2019, said, quote, "The pandemic exposed some other social misalignments in the economy which need direct intervention by assessing the developments in the labor market and in the social sectors, particularly education and health," unquote. She adds, quote, "The 2022 national budget should have presented a more comprehensive review of developments in 2020 and 2021. The pandemic aggravated existing social vulnerabilities and created other social challenges," unquote. This appears to be an indictment of your government's budget, Mr. Boson. What do you have to say for the government stewardship in that regard? And of course,
first of all, Kellen,
yes,
let me thank you for inviting me on your program and to be in the company of such illustrious citizens of our country. Before I respond to your direct question, I think it is only fitting that I respond to some of the inaccuracies in terms of government's intention with regard to the payment of salaries, as stated by my good friend, and I always refer to him as my student, Brother Lennox Andrew, and
it's
in
your
some way,
student, you said, yes?
yes, student in Ministry of Finance.
So the teacher will school the student. Please proceed, sir.
Yeah. First of all, Kellen, let me give you an overview of this 2022 budget. I have heard a number of adjectives being used to characterize this budget. Some say it is a token budget. Others say it's a Santa Claus budget, while others say it's an election budget. As far as we are concerned, this budget is a COVID relief budget, a people's budget, a budget that has responded to the crying needs, the social needs of our people, having been impacted so negatively by this global pandemic. You may recall, Kellen, that from 2014 to 2019, government presented what I refer to as surplus budgets. Every budget up to that time had an overall surplus. But in 2020, there was an overall deficit for obvious reasons. That we have this global pandemic that changed the dynamics of everything. And that is why we call a budget an estimate, because there is no predictability. You can only estimate based on past occurrences and future trends. And when Mrs. Hazard made the point that this is not a gift, it is something that is due to them, I fully agree. It was never intended to be a gift. But when that wage negotiation was negotiated in 2019, the economy was probably the best performing economy in the entire OECS. And that is why government had no problem negotiating and agreeing to the 4%. But again, as I said, unpredictability. No one predicted that pandemic. No one predicted the kind of impact that the pandemic would have on the lives of ordinary people. Over 30% of the Grenadian population went down through the cracks, sank into poverty and deprivation because of that. And therefore, the first response of any caring government must be to try to alleviate the suffering of the poor and vulnerable. And that is why this budget has been referred to as a people's budget, because it responded directly to the needs, high unemployment, increased poverty, no income based on lockdowns and everything like that. And it is not true to say that the government did not agree to pay the 5%, the 4%. What the government said, based on the pandemic, let us defer for later on in the year the payment. There was no time. Government said, we're not paying. And therefore it is inaccurate. It is not a correct statement to say that government decided they can't pay. What is interesting to me and to many others, in the middle of a pandemic, notwithstanding that it was a negotiated wage increase, but look at what has occurred in other countries like Barbados, Belize, in the pandemic, where there was a wage freeze on negotiated wage increase. In Belize, there was a wage cut. Yeah? But this government never said, we will freeze the wages or we will cut. They said, give us some time to pay. And that is where the dispute came in. So let us put that aside. It's not fair to say government did not want to pay. That is inaccurate, and let us put that aside. The 4% was negotiated. It has now been paid, partly by bonds, by a financial institution, a lump sum, the rest for the rest of the year, and then for 2022, the 4% is included in the budget. Let me go to the statement you made with regards to, and Lennox has not answered it, and I think I want to answer it. The comment made by the leader of the NDC with regards to we are focusing on concrete and bricks and construction and not the productive sector. Colin, it's unfortunate that the leader of the NDC did not consult with his economists to get a proper understanding of the role of construction in economic growth. The construction sector is a major contributor, as you said, to economic growth. And it is a major prerequisite for any kind of investment in the productive sector. And to make such a statement clearly indicates an ignorance of economics. And Lennox knows that quite well. That's why he could not answer it.
Well, I will give him a chance to respond, but please proceed. Lennox, I will give you a chance.
Yeah, but you know, how can you invest in the productive sector if you do not have the infrastructure to support the productive sector? How can farmers produce if they have no access to the land by way of farm roads? How can workers move to and from work if they do not have good roads on which to travel? How can the tourism sector grow if you do not construct the hotels? You know, there are so many areas where the construction sector impacts other sectors, in addition to its direct contribution. Let us look at what happens in the US and those major economies. Whenever there is a recession, the single most important counter-cyclical measure to stimulate economic growth and development is investing in infrastructure, massive investment in roads, bridges, ports, because they do know that that sector has the effect of creating significant employment. By generating employment, you generate income, which you can spend, and that is what resuscitates the economy. They did not say, well, look at the economy in recession, let us go directly and invest in agriculture. They invest in infrastructure to support the productive sector. Therefore, to make such a statement, in my opinion, is very unfortunate, and it shows lack of the understanding of economics. And in this time, I think you need all the economic expertise and advice before making statements that are irrelevant and not really meaningful.
Yes, but Mr. Boston, let's go back to what my question was concerning Laurel Bain.
Laurel Bain has made up. She has made her. I have not read what Laurel Bain said. I need to read it first and to understand exactly what really she was saying. But in terms of sustainability, when you look at the budget, when you look at this present budget, in addition to providing all of the relief measures to support the indigent and the poor, you will realize that the budget has a capital investment of over $333.8 million. Yeah. So really, we're looking at a balanced approach, protecting lives, but at the same time, providing that kind of capital spending that will ensure that the economy continues to grow. And that is why we are projecting growth of 4.8% in 2002 and beyond, because the capital investment program is what will sustain that growth. When you look again at the projects, you see a number of projects related to climate change. Yeah, and that stands at the center of sustainability and building of resilience for our economy. So again, as I said, I cannot comment intelligently on that statement unless I read it and to understand the context in which you made such a statement.
Okay, but all right. Stick a pin. Let me give Mr. Andrews an opportunity to respond, Mr. Andrews.
Right. So,
especially on the narrative with respect to construction statements that were made by your political.
Well, construction is only a means to an end. It is not an end in itself. It is like money. Money is a means to an end. You can't eat money. So you simply can't eat construction. At that time, what the people needed was food. There was a shortage of domestic production for domestic consumption. There was need for food to feed the population because we were going through a special period, right, in which there were shortages. Good. And therefore, what was needed at this time was a means of which you go about providing food to the population. In fact, the NDC at the time, what it did was it went out with food baskets and food packages and provided food to the population, those who could go out. Those who couldn't go out and acquire any kind of food, they were able to move and make care packages available to the population at that point in time. And that's the point the leader is making. The need to provide food to the population at a time when people couldn't have gone out anywhere to look after themselves. But I want to come back to another point. If you allow me, please, Dr. Bubb.
Yes, quickly, because we have to get to Daisy.
The point I was making, this government always speak about it being a caring government. I always say that. But I ask myself, how could you be caring when in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a pandemic, when your people don't have money, when your people don't have food, you take $171 million and you give it to a foreign investor, when that money could have been used to provide food and to provide the necessities for those persons who could no longer, who couldn't have gone out to assist themselves. Yeah? You had all that money there. Yet for all, you allow the teachers of this country to go out and march in the rain and in the sun for the 4% when you had the money to pay them. In January, you had a surplus of $1.7 million. At the end of June in 2021, your surplus was $70.4 million. But you keep saying that you don't have money to spend and hold it back, when in fact that you had the money there to spend and you didn't spend it. That could never be caring. That could never be a government that cares about its people. So it made the population suffer unnecessarily when it could have attended to the population needs as best as it could. It provided, for example, the people with only one kind of vaccine, the AstraZeneca. It was waiting on the COVAX facilities. With those monies there, it could have used it to provide other kind of and give us a choice at the time. Yeah. So in my view, when I analyze the fiscal situation, the government made it appear as if it was worse than what it really was, as a means of justifying its behavior. Good. When in fact, the fiscal performance was a lot better than what the government was saying.
Daisy, I will give you a chance here to rebut, and then we will switch gears a bit by looking at what unfolded in Parliament on a number of issues that we need to address. But quickly, Daisy, I want to give you a chance to respond to the opening salvo by the Honorable Anthony Bolson.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb. And it's a lot to assimilate and try to find a couple sentences to respond to, but let me try. It's always interesting when we hear the government narrative that, you know, there was a pandemic and government still attempted to meet its commitment in terms of the 4%, and that it was not, they had never indicated that they would not pay, they just wanted to defer the payment. We're not quibbling over that. Now, one of the narratives that happened in our negotiations in 2019, and I must speak to it, was that the government tried to bully unions into negotiating a 4-year settlement. Usually, as I said earlier, we negotiate 3-year settlements. And the premise on which they tried to bully us, and I say bully because they literally presented us this conclusion as a fait accompli, that now we are going to negotiate 4 years. And their premise was that it would be better for unions and workers because what if something happens? And I remember at the time, Minister Oliver Joseph consistently referenced the 2004 disaster, Hurricane Ivan, and also Emily of the following year. And that was the premise on which government was saying, let us negotiate a 4-year cycle so that in the event anything happened, anything catastrophic, a disaster, unions would not have a problem because you would have already locked in your 4% for 4 years up to 23. And then you came into a pandemic, which nobody foresaw, of course, but it was a catastrophe that affected Grenada. And that narrative that the GNT, the government negotiations team, had used on behalf of the government went out the window. So I'm just saying that's a moot point. So on the other hand, again, as I'm saying, and as Brother Lennox Andrew rightly pointed out, that for several years, over the last several years, workers have been making that sacrifice, which was touted as a shared sacrifice. We went through the homegrown program, which ended since 2016, but still today is affecting public servants and it's affecting some of the things that we should be able to get out of government, like our study leave policies and all that sort of a thing. In addition, Dr. Bubb, we have about 45% of the public service right now who did not even receive 4% increases. And we are talking about workers like nurses and so who are on the front lines. Customs officers
and why was that? Why was that?
Because the government in their narrative have said, although these workers work with the public service, although they pay union dues or benefits, government has said they are not part of your bargaining unit. And so consistently for years, government has found ways to duck and to hide paying these workers any kind of increase at all. So we are living in a situation in a country where persons in the public service, nurses and doctors and technicians and so, have lived through a pandemic, never received any sort of a stimulus, never received a 4% increase, will not receive it in January 2022 because the government of Grenada refuses to give it to them on some sort of a technical grounds that they have manufactured. And so while we're talking about relief to the public sector, there is no relief because again, we are receiving a negotiated settlement, but you have a vast majority, about 40 to 45%, who will receive nothing, who has received nothing for a number of years. There is no way that they receive a pay increase. The government does not give it to them. It is when we negotiate, when the unions negotiate, they do not receive it. And these workers have had to live through the pandemic, just like everybody else. They are now bearing the brunt of the increased cost of living that we are seeing in Grenada, and they will have to face 2022 with salaries that date back to 2016 and 2015 and that sort of a thing. That is the reality that we are facing in the public service. And so one of the things that we would have hoped to have seen in that budget was not just government giving lip service to it. They referenced it and said, the contract workers and those persons who have no contracts at all, outdated letters that have expired. We know it's a problem. And so we are going to ask Ministry of Finance to put something together. We have been clamoring, we have been making representation on behalf of these workers for many, many years, asking the government to fix that situation, and they have not been doing it. And so definitely public servants are not much better off, even in January 2022, receiving 4%, because it's a small percentage,
And
not the majority that would receive that money.
I just want to be clear that the people who you say are excluded are those whose work statuses have not been properly regularized. Is that the context there?
I am saying to you that the persons who are excluded are persons who government have employed ultra vires or labor laws. It's misconduct on the part of government to have employed so many persons, such a large percentage of the public servants, outside of the PSC rules and regulation, outside of governance structures, and place these persons literally into servitude. It's literally a sort of a welfare kind of a situation where you give them a job, you pay them, they have no sort of a job security, no tenure. They've been working 20 years, 16 years, many, many years, but they are still afraid because they still feel threatened in the sense that they have no tenure. They do not have a piece of paper that says, I am permanently employed. And so they toe the line all the time to secure that little salary that they do not get increases on at all. And that is a situation that the government has created. It is not a little situation, it's a huge situation. Perhaps part of that was to make our wage bill appear to be lower for agencies like the IMF and so. But what it has done to Grenadian people, especially our young people, is that they are working poor. They are pauperized by virtue of how they are employed by the government. And that is very sad. They have not received increases. They have not received stimulus because they will not qualify. And one would have thought that we would have seen in this budget something for those persons, for those workers, rather than talk that we know there's a problem and we may look into it.
Okay, so let us switch gears here, and we're going to talk about the tax relief measures, but also some of the what I would say are some of the subsidized measures with respect to electricity, for example, that the government doled out in the budget. And Dr. Fletcher, I want to bring you back here. Now, I see your camera is off there. Dr. Fletcher, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
You're having some internet issues, I suppose?
Yeah, the fluctuations. I'm trying to keep the integrity. But Dr. Bubb, if you don't mind me, please, you can indulge me a moment.
Yes.
I want to make 3 points based on what has just gone in there. And they are very critical and very important. I listened to Minister Boson pretty much as an economist, from an economist point of view and so on. And Dr. Bubb, one of the issues here is this. Whereas it is important as a first step that government policy responds to the immediacy of the period, the urgency of the period of COVID, there's also the fundamental task and responsibility of the leadership in public sector policies to ensure that we reposition the economy and the country for the future. The pandemic, we do not have any end in sight of it. We do not know what it's going to be like as mutations emerge over and over and over. What we need to do is to begin the process, and we are 1 year behind time on this, to reposition the economy from short-term gain to medium and long-term strategic growth and development. The second point I want to make has to do with the issue of equity, which was so eloquently articulated by Ms. Daisy here. Miss Hufford. You see,
Hazard, not Hufford.
Hazard, sorry, not Hufford, Miss Hazard. Sorry, Daisy. Right? The issue is that a worker is a worker in an industry, and the attempt to develop a parallel public service has led to this inequity within the system. And there got to be as far as the public sector is concerned, a worker is a worker, right? And this attempt to slice and dice the workforce is not going to augur well for the long term of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Martinique. There are countries in the world, including large developed countries, that attempted to introduce a contract workforce within the public sector, notably the United Kingdom. And if you were to look back at the impact, years later, studies were done on the impact of this contract labor into the workforce, and it showed it negated the growth of the country. And this is where we are heading. The third point I want to make, Dr. Bubb, is the issue of construction in the overall development process. Yes, construction is useful. It is important. It's a large employer of unskilled and some skilled members of the society. It is needed. But we need, this is 2021. We have been concentrating on construction as the main economic driver of this country for years. Where has it taken us? It has taken us from Point Saline to Tongue to probably Westerhall Point. It has created an urban drift where people from the rural communities, in an attempt to survive because there is no economy in those rural areas, are forced to leave their families behind, leave the land, and come into the south for economic survival and growth. We have to rebalance, and I want to humbly suggest here that we have to rebalance this growth model, because the model that we have here is not nationally encompassing enough. More importantly, as we go along the construction road, and there is need for construction. You know, you live up the western side, and you see what is happening with that road, where we now have to go through Mount Morris, yeah, and so forth. That is also developing stress. Not only is it a cost, but it's also stressful, and it leads to the point that if there were monies in the treasury that could have been used to start this project a long time ago, could it have been done earlier than later? But this is a challenge, and that I suppose Minister Boson will probably respond to. But critically as well, as we seek to respond to COVID and to set the economy on a different footing, would it not make sense to look at policies, fiscal policies, that will engineer and will act as a catalyst for the digitization of businesses, education, and the entire society? For example, could there not be significant tax breaks or significant incentives to get businesses to digitize at a quicker rate, at a faster pace, despite what's happening now independently by businesses with no regard for really, what government is saying or doing, because there is not a coherent policy. And let me end that my second comment, Dr. Bubb and colleagues and listeners, by making this point. That whereas the budget highlights at the surface level some things that will attract people at the emotional stage, when we dig deep into it, we are seeing that there are quite a bit of divergence. The coherence is not there. And from a project management point of view, if we are putting in such inputs, we are looking for greater outputs. And I'm afraid that because of the way that the budget, which is not just in numerical sightings of expectations and estimates of government revenue and expenditure, but the accompanying narrative that goes along with that budget seems to suggest very strongly that the government may have to sit back and see how it can realign its policies, its programs, so that we can get greater outputs from the taxes that the people of Grenada, Carrick, and Petite Martinique are putting into central government coffers.
And let me bring back Honorable Anthony Boson here. Mr. Boson, now that issue with respect to contract labor, contract work, actually came up in Parliament, and the Prime Minister, in a very animated display, sought to really put that issue of contract labor in his government's context, by saying that one does not necessarily have to regularize all workers. Now, you've heard what members of the panel said here today with respect to contract work. How do we get to a place where we can have that kind of job security that is needed for young people who would need to do things like access loans for for building a house, for example, right? For having long-term plans that would require some measure of serious job security.
Colin, on this issue of contract, and I believe that the Prime Minister articulated quite well. Our laws recognize 3 types of contracts. Yeah? And what is being said by Ms. Hazard and Dr. Fletcher really do not apply to all 3 types of labor contracts. Yes, there might be a category whereby one would feel that based on the tenure, based on the type of work being done, there might be need to what we call regularize those workers. And the government has made it absolutely clear that the framework is now being developed. This is not something you could do overnight. It calls for in-depth assessment before you can make such a decision. But the framework is now being put in place to regularize those categories of workers that could be regularized. It is not applicable to all 3 types of contracts. And I think we must make that absolutely clear. The point made by Dr. Fletcher with regards to transformation, and if we read page 20 of the budget statement, you will see quite clearly the government has articulated its position on digital transformation. So that will be a key aspect of our economy in moving forward, the digital economy. Therefore, I will urge members who have not read the budget statement to read it again and see the areas. Point was made with regards to electric vehicles. That may be coming soon. We are transforming this economy. And it is clearly laid out in the budget statement of 2022 as to exactly what will be done to transform and put it on a digital path of transformation. So that to me is not an issue that requires much argument in moving forward.
Okay, Minister Boston, let us switch gears here, and we want to talk about Grenlec. Now, the Grenlec issue came up ad nauseum in the budget debate. Now, where in the estimates of revenue and expenditure was that particular expenditure for the repurchase of Grenlec articulated?
To me, Kalon, the most important part is not where in the budget it is. The most important fact is that government has done what is in the national interest.
Yeah.
And personally, I believe the sale of assets to a private individual company was a crime against this government and this country. And I stand to that. I stick to that. The decision of this government to repurchase majority shares, I think, is something that is welcome. It's something to me that was long overdue, and maybe it should have been done a long time ago. So to me, it doesn't matter where in the budget the money is from. The fact is that what is the impact?
You say that, Mr. Bolson, but I would respectfully push back. If that is a significant expenditure item, right? And we have to account for spending. So I think that is a genuine question that the public has.
Kellan, the audit department will audit government's expenditure, and you could get it from them. You don't have to ask me or anybody. There is nothing hidden. There is nothing hidden, girl. Whether it's in the budget or not, that is not the material fact. The material fact is that, is it a legitimate transaction? That is what I'm concerned about. Is it a legitimate transaction? Because a number of transactions that have taken place that you may not see in the budget here. Is the legitimacy of the transaction that one has to query. And if you're telling me it is not legitimate, then maybe we could go into further discussion. But in terms of asking me where in the budget I see item $171 million, to me, that is not the most important part. The most significant aspect of it is that government did the right thing of purchasing majority shares in a company, because no self-respecting government would ever transfer such a strategic asset, something that is critical to your economic and national security, and put it in the hand of a private individual or a private company. To me, that was a crime against this country. And it matters to me, yes, maybe we could look at, maybe we could have spent less. That's an issue. Maybe we could have avoided arbitration. That's another issue. We could debate that. But what I'm saying is that in the long run, repurchasing the shares in Grenadas was a decision in the national interest. And you can see right now, based on the decision taken by government to cut the non-fuel charge by 25%, that is in the national interest. And that would not have happened if that company was owned by a foreign entity, because that hits at the core of the profitability. And there are times you have to sacrifice profitability for the interest or the better good of the majority of poor people in this country. And I'm saying that this is an excellent move that the government has made to reduce the non-fuel charge and to remove the environmental levy and the VAT up to 500 kilowatt hours per. That's in the national interest. That's in the interest of the poor and ordinary people, everybody, because everyone will benefit from that. Whether you're a consumer, whether you're a small manufacturer, you benefit from that. If it was in WRB's possession, that was not going to happen, Kelon, except government has the flexibility to remove the VAT and the environmental levy, which is the insignificant components of the overall relief given to our people.
Mm-hmm. And we have to come up for a panel. This has been more of a, it felt like a sprint. The topics, excuse me, that we were addressing and articulating here this afternoon, going into the afternoon. But what we want to do is to take a quick break. Mr. Bolson, you are the Deputy Speaker of the House, I believe, and we are going to come up for a quick break here, and we will come back to continue with this very important post-budget debate discussion. Stand by, folks.
This is the Bubb Report with Dr. Kellon Bubb.
Well, we have youth here too. Are you looking? When I got involved in politics, I was 32. That's true youth, not 44. 44 is no youth because I'm within that age range and I'm no longer a youth.
Further, he went on to say that we should be careful that Grenadas does not fall back into WRB's hands. Remember, he's a part of them, Mr. Speaker, whether formally or informally. So I thank him, Mr. Speaker, for exposing the plan.
Yes, yes.
So I ask Mr. Speaker, what is the quid pro quo? Yes. What is it, Mr. Speaker? If, when you get there, I will come back, what am I giving to you?
Because you don't know when I ring the bell. I have a bell right in the pocket. You never know. I heard you said change is coming. Change is really coming, Leader of the Opposition. I've heard it said that these crucial interventions represent what? Tokenism? Is that really what I heard? Tokenism, yes. I cannot say that I'm entirely surprised by the use of that description, Mr. Speaker. Because when you have been in the ivory tower making fees, lots of fees, and that's your right, yes, from serious business transactions, and you just have to deal with legalistic issues, not even understanding the social and other problems that these issues cause us at different levels. And even when the government has to pay 60-something, $5+ million for WRB, we must pass it through you. And you know the fees related to that, Mr. Speaker. You know the amount of money. We should give back this money to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique.
And welcome back, folks. Those were some highlights from the just concluded budget debate in the lower house of the Grenadian Parliament. And of course, that budget debate was, notwithstanding the issues that it addressed that we discussed earlier, it was punctuated by an attempt to define the current political leader of the National Democratic Congress, at least through the lens of the incumbent administration, as someone who is a friend of big business, as someone who is a friend, for example, of the WRB enterprises. In fact, the Honorable Minister of Finance intimated that perhaps if the NDC were to win the next general elections, that they perhaps might be engaging in matters of quid pro quo. And Mr. Andrew, I want to give you an opportunity here to really react to just the nature and the tenor of the budget debate. I know that you were also, when you served in the Ministry of Finance, you worked to prepare some estimates of revenue and expenditure. But in the context of the current political climate in Grenada, in the context of the Grenlec debate, of course, we just addressed Grenlec here. I want to give you an opportunity to do two things. One, articulate and reflect on the nature of the budget debate that that was unfolded, and two, I want you to also address the Grenlec question.
Well, the nature of the discussions we're having so far about the budget. Let me say this. I think this budget missed a golden opportunity. A golden opportunity to be the start of at least 3-year plan to transform the economy. Bearing in mind the weaknesses that has been shown in our economy coming out of the pandemic. Yeah. So if any serious thought was given to transforming the economy, what we see in the budget are basically piecemeal approach. They are not part of a concatenated, well-discussed plan put together over a 3-year period, which says that in the first year, we will focus on healthcare services, improving our healthcare services, because the pandemic revealed that our healthcare services are weak. Yeah? Or let us say in the second year, we will focus on domestic production for domestic consumption and food security, because that was a major issue that was revealed. Good. That in the third year, for example, we can focus on the creative economy, on ICT and digital economy, and all those things, or a combination of them. Good. So I really thought that this budget would have started the process of economic transformation and development as enunciated by Dr. Fletcher. Yeah. So the budget, it missed that. It missed that. I mean, and I'm saying that because if you look at some of the relief measures, in the budget, right? The removal of VAT on certain products like saltfish and turkey pots and cooking oil and so forth. You know, I have a view that our Caribbean leaders today are not as nationalistic and patriotic as our leaders who fought against the old colonial empire and gave us our independence. Our leaders then had an economic strategy for the region called ISI, import, substitution, industrialization. What they wanted to do was to focus on domestic production to replace some of our imported items. There were things that the countries were bringing in that we could have produced ourselves in the region. And those great leaders like Eric Williams, Forbes Bonham, all these great men, these great leaders, Bradshaw, right, Cato, George Price, who fought for our independence and said to our people that we locals are capable of running and developing our country. I don't see that kind of patriotism and nationalism being demonstrated in our present leaders. Because take something like saltfish. We can produce saltfish ourselves. Take something like turkey parts. We can produce our own chicken and turkey parts ourselves. We have coconut oil, right? I know somebody in Telescope who makes goat cheese to replace cheddar cheese, good tasting cheese. Belmont Estate makes goat cheese. Split peas, we have green peas, we have our own green peas. And therefore what is needed was a group of incentive measures aimed at getting our people, to produce these items ourselves, to increase our domestic production, our GDP, increase our food supply, and at the same time, protect ourselves in the case of similar external shocks that are likely to occur in the future. In any case, the pandemic is still here with us, and therefore we should still be focusing on increasing our domestic production for domestic consumption so we could withstand and we could be more healthy. But we're not doing that.
Mr. Andrews, please get to the two questions that I asked.
Right. So
the nature and the tenor of the budget debate, as well as Grenlec. As I said before, the members of the government side, the MPs, attempted to define your political leader as someone who played an integral role in defending what the government perceived as an interest that was counter to the state interests of the state of Grenada.
Well, the political leader would have done his part as an academic, as a business, as an individual who represents a business. So what he has to do is to provide the best legal advice to his business. And nothing is wrong with that. Nothing is wrong with that. Now that he is a politician and he's involved in politics, he will provide the best advice to the protection and the development of our people. And that's how you have to see him. You have to separate the two. The man is interested in the development of our homeland and of our people. Good? And as a politician, that is what he's going to do. And he's going to seek and have with him the best possible economic advice, because economics has been the handmaid of politics since medieval times. Good? So what happened is a private issue as against a national issue. And when it comes to the national issue about the country's development and growth, that's how we must see him, right? As a national figure working towards the development and the transformation of our homeland and people. And therefore we expect that he will always act in the best interest of our people in that regard. All right?
Go ahead. And then I'll bring back Dr. Fletcher. Quickly, let me get to Dr. Fletcher. Go ahead, Mr. Andrews.
But I was saying to you that the Grenlec issue must be seen in the context of where the world is going, right? The world is moving away from fossil fuels, and the world is now moving into renewable energy. So any effort aimed really at reducing the rates should be part of our whole program of moving towards the renewable energy approach where the world is going right now. I don't know if it makes sense spending $63 million US on a company that uses fossil fuel and that helps to produce more CO2, which destroy the ozone layer, and give the sun a free run on our land and cause climate change and sea level rise. So my view is that what is important is for the government to give consideration to a whole program, of the development of Grenlec, the transformation of Grenlec, the direction of Grenlec along non-renewable source, non-renewable energy being produced. Good? I don't think it was a very good investment at all at this point in time.
Okay, let me bring back Dr. Fletcher here. On the question of Grenlec, it came up ad nauseum in the debate. I thought at some points that certainly, and this is notwithstanding that other issues were addressed, but I thought at some point that this was a debate on Grenlec, obviously given the nature of the expenditure that it was. But Dr. Fletcher, did you have a chance to listen to any of the budget debate at all, and the Grenlec debate in particular? I don't think we had an opportunity to hear from the IAGDO, at least on the Bubb Report, about your position with respect to that major expenditure item.
Well, certainly I spent an enormous amount of time following the budget debates, following the economy of Grenada. If you look at my eyes around it, it's quite dark this morning because I've spent almost the entire night going through all the YouTube videos, listening to the speeches, reading the narratives, looking at the estimates and so forth. But here is not the place for presentation of all of these. Allow me to make the following points. And herein is the lack of coherence of this budget that I started to speak of. Pulling it together in a coherent way that leads to greater output, which would have demonstrated great thought and cohesive planning for the development of this country. Before I answer your question, Bob, there's one point I want to make on the digitization issue. And I want to link it with what Mr. Andrews have said. This is the opportunity for this transformation to take place. The issue of digitization have been spoken about year after year after year. We can go back to budget presentations. But where are the allocations for it? And I will be happy if I cannot recall Minister Boson seeing a specific line item on digitization of the country in a significant way. If you can direct me, I'll be more than happy to follow that. But specific to the questions raised, Dr. Bob, let us be very mindful of the following. Every country in the world and every government has the opportunity from time to time to take policy decisions in the interest of the people, taking into account national security requirements, economic development needs, and social coherence. This is a standard basis. When the arrangement was entered into for the sale of the Grenada Electricity Company, it was done within a certain context. And I'm not here now to debate the specifics of the contractual agreement that was made, except to say that it was done within a certain context and so on. The question for us, though, the policy decision-making that we entered into to get out of that agreement, was it the best choice? Did the government exercise the best option in the interest of the small man, in the interest of Grenadians, in the interest of the business community, by providing a foreign company and making them 171 or over 63 US million dollars richer by simply passing papers, simply by shuffling papers? We have given them that in one slot. Money that was needed significantly for COVID issues, for payment of public servants, for investment in the infrastructure, investment in education, and building resilience, because we have a serious water problem on our hands right now. And I'm not sure that we have invested sufficiently in ensuring that we have adequate water supply now and into the future. So the question is a public policy one, and as to the extent to which that decision at that point in time yielded the public the best interest. Moreover, it is my understanding that there was an opportunity before that we could have negotiated this issue at a much lower cost to the taxpayers of this country. Did we take the opportunity? And finally, on this issue of the WRB matter and the debates that went on, you know, as a country that relies heavily on foreign direct investment, we always have to be cautious and strike that balance between national interest, protecting us, being patriotic, fighting for our people, defending our people at all costs, putting Grenada first, second, and third. This is an imperative of every government. But important as well is the need for us to attract inward investment. Every government that has been in office in this country since independence, Gary, Maurice Bishop, and subsequent, have understood the importance of foreign direct investment. And we have evidence of that around. When we are engaging and when we are disengaging from foreign direct investment, it is important to bear these two elements in cost. There are much more, but bear these two in cost. And listen to me. One, what is going to cost the public purse? And what is the opportunity cost for paying out 63 million US dollars today to our people? The second issue is this. How does that apparent confrontation and conflict between national government and not just government, the state of Grenada and the foreign investor plays out in the international investment arena? How can we in fact ensure that we reduce conflict, that we eliminate conflict, while protecting our national interests in such a manner that it does not do harm to the investment environment in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique? And I think, unfortunately, probably the WRB matter is one that plays into that deficit side of things. And I believe it could have handled and it could have been dealt with much better. On the issue of energy, because WRB, folks, must not just be discussed as a case between the state of Grenada versus WRB and put within a, the purely political context. There's a political economy of energy. And in discussing WRB, the secondary layer that we should address is how are we going to proceed with our energy policy going forward. There is quite a lot of talk about alternative energies and so on, and moving away from fossil fuels and so forth. But have we done deep studies and analysis of what is going to cost us, how we're going to move, and where the pressure points are, and how we are going to release those pressure points? At this moment, I know there are a number of private investors and the private businesses, residential homes that are moving into solar energy and so forth. And that is good, that is commendable. But we need to have a cohesive program in place for addressing the energy needs of the country, but also situating it in the industrial future. What industrial future are we looking at? And how do we reposition our energy policy to really focus on those things? How we deal with issues of the poor working people, the rural folks who are dependent on energy of whatever type to suit their needs. I have not seen a coherent, despite all the talk about alternative energy and changing our energy policy, I have not seen a cohesive energy policy that benefits the poor in this country, the rural poor, that ensure that while we move from fossil fuel and we deal with all the issues around Grenlec, that there are coherent policies and investment in place to do this. Finally, governments always walk in a tightrope, yes, and they make promises which sometimes cannot be kept, but they make it nonetheless. It goes to the heart of development in a soft way. You may recall, Dr. Bubb, I made the point that there are two aspects to this budget. There's a quantitative aspect, the numerical, the numbers, and there's a qualitative aspect, the narratives of what is said. Over the years, we have had a lot of narratives said on the same thing. And one of the fundamental issues is that of trust. Trust moves countries. Are we establishing trust between the people and the government so that national development can take place? This is something we need to address. And also, let us go back to the revolutionary period, 1979 to 1983. I will submit, Dr. Bubb, to you as one who supervises PhD and master's students, that if you were to look at Grenada's development during that period, you will identify that one of the unique things that happened in this country that had created the catalyst for the development of this nation is the mobilization of the people, the mass mobilization of people, both in terms into organizations, but also mobilizing them around projects. And a shining example of that is the international airport. I can tell you, Dr. Bubb, that I was one of the students at the time who were involved in the mobilization of stones, gathering of stones from Concord River, from the Palmis Beach, to be taken down to the Point Saline airport for the construction of that airport. People were involved. And needless to talk about the other well-established programs that we had, the selling of shares and so on, to help in the development of this country. The development has to be people's-based. It got to be people-centered. The people must become the center and focus of all of our activities in order to move this country forward into the right direction and put the people first, not just in words, not just in social programs. As important as they are is genuine equity, genuine equal treatment of people regardless of political participation. And this is why I raised the concern again in my early statement, Mr. Bubb. There are a lot of things in the social network, in the social program, right? But equally, we are also hearing a lot of anecdotal information circulating out there, even within the NGO community, of the disproportionate way in which people are treated because of perceived partisan support. We have to get this out of the development paradigm. Grenada is too small. Our resources are too limited. Our capacities are too limited. Let us stop this coloring issue and pull people into the web. And I'm sure Mr. Boson would certainly agree. I'm sure Mr. Boson will certainly agree that we need all hands on deck, irregardless of color. And it's time that we begin to see it. And the budget does not speak to that. The budget does not tell us whether there will be equity. The budget does not tell us whether we're going to continue to treat people in a disadvantageous position and treat organizations in a disadvantageous position because of the color that they support. Grenada is for everybody. We need an umbrella. We need a tent around Grenada that pulls everyone with good intentions, irregardless. Listen to this, Dr. Bubb. It's not supporters of one party that is interested in the development of this country. All of us, NGO, private sector, public sector, private residents, private businesses, we are all interested in the development of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. The development paradigm does not resolve in one party. Get rid of the tribalism. Get rid of it for development. We will never move forward unless we remove this castigation of persons, sectors of our communities, because of our perception of the politics. Let this budget be, and let us go back. It is still being debated. Let us reconfigure this budget. Let the government persons in the Senate set a new tone, set a tone for us, that this country is on a different path, that we are breaking ground, that we're going to transform not only the economy, but transform the people's mindset, transform this country for the good of all of us. We haven't learned from COVID. Let me fix this. Not that we haven't learned. The people has learned. I am not sure that the leadership has learned. Because during COVID period, Dr. Bubb, you were not here. I was observing it very closely. I used to drive out to the rural communities and observe what was happening. We are beginning to have a vibrant and robust commercial agricultural sector. We did not have to teach farmers how to be businessmen. They were becoming businessmen because of the circumstances. We had agricultural production on increase. Trucks and cars were going around the country selling food and food products. I know of one person who has moved from selling clothing, items of clothing, into selling agricultural products during COVID period. And it is a thriving small business. Have we captured that? Have we leveraged that?
Dr. Fletcher, your passion is heartfelt, but we have to quickly get to the next segment. I did not mean to interrupt your flow.
Thank you. I agree.
I believe based on the audience comments here and your sentiments have been heartfelt, but there are some who said that you advised the previous NDC administration. Where was all of that during that time? But I digress here. And
you want me to respond to it?
Yes, quickly, please.
Well, I never knew that I was an advisor to the NDC government. I worked for the NDC government, but I am not sure I was an advisor in that
Right,
capacity.
right. I'm
I will
just
answer it for
quoting
that
some
for
of
now
the
in the
audience.
interest of time. But if the
Correct,
person wish, we
correct.
can get involved in a sort of bilateral, and I don't mind coming on another program to deal with this matter frontally.
Absolutely. I think we really need the opportunity to do that. But what we want to do, panel, and let me thank you. I know it's beyond your lunchtime, and I know Daisy, thank you again for taking the time from your vacation. We want to have some closing comments for this particular segment. It was very spirited debate. I thought the debate was above board. It did not get too contentious, I hope, perhaps between the student and the teacher, the two economists that we have here, Mr. Boson and Mr. Andrews. But I want to start with you, Daisy, for some wrap-up comments. What do you hope to see implementation-wise in 2021 from the government of Grenada, specifically relating to the commitments around relief measures, wage increases for public servants?
Okay, thank you again, Dr. Bob. And, I kind of feel this morning that I really did not get the opportunity to articulate as much as I would have wanted to the union's point of view. But I'm still happy.
Time flies when we're having fun.
Yes, time definitely flies. But I'm happy to be here. And just before I answer that question, I cannot leave this program this morning and not respond to a statement made by Mr. Boson in terms of types of contracts and workers being on contracts. And what Minister Boson did was to give us some facts, but to not tell us the truth. Because there are three types of contracts or ways under which government can employ persons within the public service under contract. But to say that a worker who's been working 20 years as a maid or as a cleaner or as an IT tech, doing the same job every day, without fail, alongside workers who are doing the same type of job, to say that that worker is on contract for that long, that's false. That worker is no longer on contract. The same labor code that you point to, which speaks about three types of contracts, also tells you that you cannot employ a person continuously, or you should not, beyond 2 years, and still say that the person is temporary or under contract. So what we've had is a government that has systematically, and we believe that from the union's point of view, deliberately and systematically devised these ways of employing people, ultra vires the labor code, keeping them in employment but in servitude and vulnerable to the employer, such that they never feel that they have a voice that they can speak. And in the meantime, jobs that are on the establishment are being allowed to be frittered away or to go by way of attrition, rather than workers take up these positions that are available. So every 2 years, you see these positions go by the way. And we believe that has been a deliberate and systematic approach by the government in a way to employ persons, but not have to treat with them and deal with them fairly as employees, and that is wrong. And to say that it's being spoken about in Parliament, that talk is cheap. What we want to see is the same government that has created this draconian system that so disenfranchises our young people and our workers in this country, take immediate measures and steps together with the union to fix it and rectify it. So I had to dig that in there. Now, in terms of course, we hope to receive our 4% payments. I believe we will receive it. We are looking forward as well to seeing the cap on gasoline prices, because the union was coming to a point where we were beginning to believe that we would have had to approach government to say, reduce the work week. Because if you have workers who have to use their vehicles to do their jobs and that sort of a thing, and have to pay that kind of a price at the pump, certainly they cannot be expected to do it on water. So this is a place where we were coming at, but fortunately government has come about and said, we are going to give the entire society some relief. It is long overdue, and so we are happy for that, not just for our workers, but for the entire population, and we hope that it can continue to happen. There is a little point of contention. We understand again that there are some workers from under the Ministry of Health who will receive, we are hearing a month's pay, we are hearing half pay, we are hearing it's the entire ministry, we are hearing some workers. What we are saying to the government is, we know that you have a tiger by the tail. We know that this shifting and the changes in the political landscape has really has shaken this government up. It's easy to see that. We are seeing this very caring and compassionate government, and we are happy to see that government, because that is what we want. That is the kind of government we would always want to see running our nation, a caring and compassionate government. But when you are introducing measures For instance, in terms of wanting to pay some workers, how do you determine which worker? How do you determine in a very non-subjective way, in a very objective way, this person deserves an emolument, that person deserves full pay, that person deserves half pay because they worked so hard during COVID? And one might be tempted to think, well, it's just nurses and doctors. We are very, very happy if anybody at all can receive something. But we are saying the piecemeal approach that government is taking, the quick fix kind of approach, let's just slap something there to make the thing look and feel good, that is going to create some contention because there are too many classes and categories of workers throughout the public service that we cannot even speak about. Even before we had the first case of COVID on the island that nurses and doctors and our healthcare teams and professionals had to deal with, those persons were taking night and making day to ensure that Grenada could survive the pandemic in terms of things and systems that were put in place. We have not heard, for instance, that our immigration officials and customs officials would receive any sort of emolument, but they are the first line of contact. They are the ones, even before COVID can get into Grenada, they are the first line of contact. So how can we give someone else an emolument but not give them? And I think government, in attempting to do what you're doing, you have to ensure that there is fair play, and you are not creating further division and further grievance among public officers. Also, in terms of tax breaks, we welcome it. What we would not want to see is that while the government is saying there's going to be no increases in taxes and we are giving you a break here, that quietly fees on other things are increased. We saw it even during a pandemic year between 2020 and 2021. We saw our fees, like court fees, go up. We saw instances where there were no fees at all, jump to $50, $100. And for a poor man who has a matter before the court, for instance, $25 or $50 makes a difference. We hear lawyers telling you that in the past, where a person was missing a stamp, we might have paid it $5 or $15 and put that stamp on for them. Now we cannot do it because those fees have been escalated. And we have seen government do that in the past. Quiet, say to us in public and in parliament, no increases in fees, no new taxes, but then quietly sometime later you hear passport has gone up by $125 or a particular fee or tax in the society has gone up. Now, when it comes to the breaks on Grenlec, I listened to the Minister of Finance, Minister Gregory Boyne, telling us that if Grenada was still owned by WRB, there is no way the government would have been able to take away their own taxes and levy. And I'm still trying to understand that. It is your tax, it is your levy, it is by your own machinations and ego and pride that we ended up paying all these millions of dollars for Grenlec, to buy back Grenlec. Because when we look at the history and the saga of the buyback, we know that we could have bought back Grenlec many years ago, 2018, at less than half the price that we ended up paying in 2020. And yes, the Grenadian people do need a proper accounting as to where the money came from to buy back Grenlec. It is our money, it is our business, it is our property. You cannot tell us that you just bought it back and we should just be happy about that. So in conclusion, I just want to say that we, from a labor's point of view, we are looking forward to 2022. We are looking forward to seeing workers receiving that ease that government has promised and the entire society. And we know that we all have to band together and work very hard to come through the next stages of the pandemic. So I just want to say to everyone, Merry Christmas. And let us look forward positively to 2022.
And you struck a very optimistic tone. I suspect that we would not be seeing you on the streets for any further industrial action, save and except if those commitments.
The pension and gratuity issue and the contract issue, the issue of workers working with no tenure for years, that's a very sore and burning issue. And if we have to take to the streets on it, we will, because it cannot go on unabated.
Okay. All right. And let me bring in Mr. Nichols. Thank you for waiting, laying in wait here. Mr. Nichols from Barbados. He is a replacement guest for Mr. Alex Downs, who unfortunately was unable to appear on the program today. But I want to give Mr. Lennox Andrews an opportunity for some closing comments. What do you expect to see in 2022? Some are suggesting that it might be an election year, but more specifically with respect to the implementation of the measures outlined in the budget, what do you hope to see? What would be a party strategy in ensuring that you would also hold the government to account, for example, if those measures are not implemented? Over to you, Mr. Andrews.
Well, yes. So thanks again, Karen Bubb, Dr. Bubb, for your question. Now, obviously, we are looking at 2022, and we're going to follow 2022 very closely. There are some reports that government's supposed to provide to the parliament on a regular basis, yeah, as regards the fiscal performance of the country. So, for example, when our year ends, by April of the next year, the Accountant General is supposed to send to the auditor a report on the final fiscal situation of the country, of revenue and expenditure. The auditor will then table that to Parliament so we can get a clear picture of where we are in 2020, 2021. We would hope that that will happen, right? That will happen in 2020, 2021, that report would take place, because I heard the opposition leader saying that those reports never came to Parliament. The Public Accounts Committee is one committee that's supposed to be functioning and should be getting all those reports as well. He also indicated that those reports were not there. So we hope that those things will be happening. And when we get those reports, we will study them and analyze them in terms of what the government has planned and what the actual outcome would be. Now, when you look at what's been happening in the economy, and when you look at the fiscal data that the government provides, we see a totally different story from what the government is always saying. The government never seems to be telling us the truth about what is happening in the economy, right? It is only after we got this financing part of the budget that it is known that the government has $83.6 million in reserves, which it could use to meet the needs of the population. But it is saying that it has a tight fiscal space. So there's a problem of information and of information sharing. The National Transformation Fund, for example, is one area that has to be tabled to Parliament on a regular basis. It's not has been happening. While a decision could be made in Parliament that this or that project could be financed from the fund, the main thing is, what is the fund balance at a particular point in time? What is this balance at the end of June, at the end of September? Good. So we get a clear picture of the real financial situation in the country. Good. So, and those are things that needs to be monitored, because I'm telling you, Grenada today has a fundamental problem of governance. Yeah, we have a problem of governance. There's not much regards and not much respect for our people in this country. People just seem to feel that they can do what they want and say what they want and expect the population to accept it. Yeah. So we're monitoring all those developments that can take place in 2022. And of course, as a party, we're making ourselves ready to take power and to lead. And we want to say to the population,
you have to win an election first, I'm sure.
yes. And we want to say to the population that we are quite capable. Good. There is a view in this country that people in this country know how to run a country. Well, we know how to run a country. I know how to run a country, for sure. Right? And therefore, we are quite capable of managing the economy and of doing a much better job, and doing so with respect and with regards to our population. And bearing in mind that whatever we do must be always for the interest of the population, for the interest of the people. We always seek to give our people a better life, a higher standard of living. And for this, we will educate our population, we will train our young people, we will give them career in the creative economy. No reason why our young people cannot be IT specialists. No reason why they cannot be well-renowned designers. Good. A friend of mine told me he went to Japan in a bar and he heard the song I Am by Wizard being played in the bar. Good. So no reason why we cannot produce goods and services that are of the highest quality and that can be sold internationally and can make us proud as a nation and as a people. That is what we want to do to our population, to help to transform this country and give everybody in this country a sense of national pride, a sense of national independence, a sense of financial freedom and economic freedom, where they could use their talent and their ability to produce a good or a service that has a demand that people will buy and people will pay for, and earn a decent income and reduce the dependence that exists in our society on governments for whatever we need. My view is that there is too much government in our country, far too much government in our economy, and there is need for far more participation of the individuals, of people, to own business and to get on to produce more to help themselves, and in so doing to help our country. And that's the approach we would like to see happening.
All right, so I would go from student to teacher. From Lennox Andrews, the student, to Anthony Boson, the teacher. That is the context of the relationship here that I was informed at the start of the program, gentlemen. So I'm glad that we were able to have a spirited debate. No one was left hurt, and I believe the audience really appreciated this discourse. So over to you, Member of Parliament for St. Patrick West.
Thank you, Dr. Bob, for giving me the opportunity to summarize. First of all, I would like to correct two serious mistakes made by Ms. Hazard. Minister Bowen never said, he never said what you are alluded that he said. He made the remark that if Grenlec was still under control of WRB, there would be no reduction in the non-fuel charge. That was the point he made. But I'm hearing you quoting him as saying that the environmental levy and the other charge would not be removed. These are government charges. They could be removed at any time. The point he made is that Grenlec was never interested in renegotiating the formula as to how you calculate the non-fuel charge. And he also went on to say that it was the present leader of the NDC who was instrumental in ensuring that Grenlec did not renegotiate in order to bring the benefits that the people of Grenada are getting now because of the reduction in the non-fuel charge. And in that context, I would like to ask my student. He defended his leader, and I have no problem with any lawyer working on behalf of whoever employ you. You have to do that in their best interest. So at that point in time, he was protecting the interests of WRB, whose main concern was profit maximization at the expense of the ordinary people of Grenada. Now, he's on the other side of the fence. I am asking, will there be a change in his outlook to now defending the ordinary people of Grenada? That is what I want to find out, because you cannot be on both sides of the fence at the same time. So that is what will demand some clarity, that now you're presenting yourself as a public figure, someone to defend the interests of the poor and ordinary people. Are you prepared to change your position with regards to how, your defense of those who make humongous profits at the expense of the poor people? Another point I want to make, Brother Lennox. This budget was prepared within the framework of two plans. First, you have what you call the recovery plan of 2020 to 2023 to 2024. And being an economist, you know that a budget is a one-year plan. It's almost a rolling plan. And the fiscal responsibility laws mandate that we present a budget within certain frameworks. And there are a number of what you call supporting documents to this budget. You have the medium-term debt management strategy, a couple of those documents which support the budget as presented. And ultimately, it is presented within the framework of the long-term Sustainable Development Plan 2020 to 2035.
Yeah, but Tony, all these documents...
No, don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me.
Don't interrupt, please.
Yeah, so I'm saying that these documents, that is how we have to look at this budget. And again, I want to emphasize that this budget is a balanced budget, reflecting the need to intervene on behalf of the poor and ordinary people of Grenada who are suffering because of this pandemic, no income, high unemployment. Government has that social responsibility to intervene. And that is why we have the significant increase in current spending by way of transfers. And if you look at the number of interventions, reduction in VAT on a number of items, increasing the public assistance from 300 to 450, something the previous NDC promised and never delivered. And Lennox, you should know that. Yeah, but no, this government did not promise. They delivered even before making any promise. You have to look at that. You have to look at the $15 cap on price of gasoline, which means that with the price of gasoline now $17.50 or something ever, government is losing over $2 in petroleum tax. And as long as the price keeps going up, it means that government will continue to lose revenue. Yeah? So let us not trivialize this budget. But at the same time, government recognizes the need that you have to stimulate the economy. And that is why when you look at the capital investment program for 2022, it's much higher than what was achieved in 2021, $333.8 million, because without capital investment, the economy cannot grow. So that is something we should recognize. Also recognize in the budget the number of projects that are geared towards building resilience. We overlooking those. And finally, I want to make the point. We are trivializing, I think it is a bit disingenuous to say that government give away $175 million as though the government got nothing in return. Very disingenuous, my friend. Government repurchased the shares. You might argue that maybe they paid too much for it. I have no problem if you want to argue that. But don't tell the Grenadian people that government give away $175 million. Those 71% shares now in the hands of government. Government can do one or two things. They could hold on to the shares, but as they have indicated, they will divest the shares to ordinary Grenadians who will now be able to get dividends from those shares. Instead of the millions of dividends going out to foreign shareholders every year, have you calculated the quantum of resources that have gone out of this country since 1984 in terms of by way of dividends to foreign shareholders? That will now be retained in our country. So don't say that it's $171 million that is given away. It's not given away like that. And I think we have to be fair about this thing. The company is not owned by Grenada. The shares will be divested to Grenadians and they will benefit from that. No longer will one or two foreign shareholders who have no interest in Grenada be ripping off our poor people. And that is something the previous government did not care anything about. So now you're talking about you will represent people. With that kind of mindset, you're not representing people, you're representing foreign interests. This government is about local people, supporting our local people, helping them to get out of the hole that they're in now, created by this pandemic. And finally, I want to say that
yes, quickly,
in moving forward, I believe that we will engage all stakeholders in negotiating or developing this framework for getting those contract workers who deserve to be regularized indeed. And as I said before, it's not all. And I agree with Ms. Hazard, there are some categories of workers who have been there a long time doing the work that could be done by others, but yet they are on contract. That's not fair. And that is what the government has recognized. So don't make it look as though, well, government is not in favor of regularizing and it's just old talk. It's not old talk, it's serious. Thank you, Kellen, for giving me the opportunity to appear on your program.
Absolutely, Minister of Finance. And Dr. Fletcher, I will give you the opportunity for some final summation before we get to our next segment. We have Mr. Anderson Nichols, who's joining us from Barbados. I don't know if you're in Bridgetown, sir, but this has been certainly a momentous period for your country. So we want to get into just a quick discussion around the feeling and the mood on the ground in Barbados around your transition to Republican status. So do stand by. Dr. Fletcher, over to you for some final comments as we get to our next segment, sir.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Bubb, listeners and colleague panelists. I will start off from where Minister Boson ended in talking about when he mentioned rather the issue of basically in a nutshell praising the ownership of the Grenada company to our citizens, and that is really welcome. That is excellent. He mentioned the stopping of the exploitation and so on of people, and I hope that theme on which he ended is ingrained within the government policy going forward, that as we attract foreign investors, that we set up the frame work is to ensure that it renounces to the good of Grenadians and therefore demonstrate a high level of patriotism, a high level of nationalism, and get that ingrained within within our national economic development frame. I also want to make the point in ending that, you know, the Minister of Agriculture made a very spirited presentation at the budget debate, in which he articulated on a number of things in agriculture, including the merger between cocoa and nutmeg, the establishment of the research center in Maribor, and a number of other areas, which is quite good as a narrative. I think he did a splendid job. I know that Minister of Agriculture, Peter David, is really committed to the development of the agricultural sector. And
He
once
was
has the support,
also, not wanting to cut you, he was also one of the few ministers that did not address the atmospherics of the political atmospherics in the country, at least. Himself and Yolan Bain, I believe, and the Member of Parliament for St. John, they were the only ones who did not talk about the new leader of the NDC. Deacon Mania seemed to have taken hold in the Parliament, but please proceed.
Great, you observed. In fact, in that context, I must reference the IGDO contract. There is a commitment that was developed, I think, around 2003, thereabout, in which the political parties committed themselves to a certain conduct. It was called the Code of Conduct, specifically geared towards election, but generally for the conduct of politicians. So I'm happy, Dr. Bubb, that you are able to identify what you have just said. And that is useful for the body politic going forward. So I was making the point that Minister really has spoken from his heart with a deep passion for agriculture. And this is important from a national perspective because as an individual, certainly, and I think within the NGO community that has divergent views and focuses on various sectors, that the agricultural sector is really important for the transformation of this country. We need to look at the cocoa and nutmeg subsectors and see how we can transform them, bring greater value to them. There is the issue of mergers and so on, and we have to look to see how we move, all right, from the current state into a much more up-level, higher value stage for these products. And in fact, I do believe that if we concentrate efforts for a year or two on these two sectors, we can really begin a process of transforming this country in a way in which these sectors can be very transformational for this country, meaning lifting the quality of life for everyone, for the vast majority of persons, and not for a few. From the IGDO perspective, certainly there are measures in the budget that the various organizations will welcome. The issue of women and gender violence, the GINA one, so I think we'll certainly look into that. The other organizations, the ART, the Grenadas, and so on, we'll look to see how, in fact, we can segue into this budget, and again, hope that the government in its implementation model really incorporate, and I'm happy to hear Mr. Boson again talk about consultation in regard to the public servants. I will really deeply encourage deeper consultations with the NGO community, including businesses, by the way, including the Chamber of Commerce and the tourism organization and so forth, in implementing, so that the broad cross-section of people benefit and that the country rise. As the water rises, so too everyone rises and benefits. So we look forward to a year in which we'll reduce poverty, in which we will lift our people out of poverty, in a year in which businesses, especially small businesses, entrepreneurship will be enhanced and so forth, and we will provide greater support to small businesses. Minister Boson has been in the economic realm for quite a while, and I think he understands now that some of the average size loans that are offered to businesses is really inadequate. It is undercapitalizing small businesses. It does not provide enough capital for these businesses to invest and expand and grow at this point. And it's an area that I hope with the government, the Grenadas Development Bank, the Chamber of Commerce and so on, we can sit around and really construct a model to ensure that we bring growth, development for all. I also hope that it's going to be a year in which greater attention is given to all of the people, to the NGO sector, and so forth, and really lead to do something transformational, the digitization project, take into account the social services, the education, but also the sustainability of some of the investments that we are making today. Some of it really needed, Minister Boson. Welcome. They are short-term for now. What we need is a plan that will ensure that we can continue to sustain those payments if it becomes necessary, but more importantly, a plan that reduces reliance on social services, a plan that gets our people to work, a plan that increases the participation of young people, of youths into the labor market, a plan that reduces the stress and the frustration of persons looking for jobs, not being able to find appropriate jobs, and therefore going back into the shell. Construction is not for everyone. I'm sure that quite a number of the ministers and so on, given the construction industry as the sole option for them, we would not survive. So we have to look at a multifaceted front and lift this country for the benefit of all. And if this is the last program, Dr. Bubb, I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas season. All of your listeners and viewers, my fellow panelists, I wish us well. And importantly, we are still in COVIDious times.
Correct.
We're still emerging from this. What the COVID pandemic has done initially is to strip some of our countries and economies open, bear back it, show the fault lines. And I hope we're going to look at those fault lines with Omicron on the horizon again, that we develop appropriate responses. We protect ourselves, we protect our loved ones, and we protect our nation. Thank you very much.
Correct, Dr. Fletcher, let us not get our guards down, right? Especially
Absolutely.
in the context of this very relenting contagious virus. So, Dr. Fletcher, thank you for agreeing. Panel, Honorable Anthony Boson, Daisy Hazard, and Mr. Lennox Andrews, thank you all for appearing on the program today. It was certainly a spirited debate and discussion. Perhaps I hope that we were able to contribute to raising the quality of discourse here on the Bubb Report. So thank you all for agreeing to appear today. And on this note, folks, we will take a quick break and come back with a colleague from Barbados who would reflect on the history-making moments that occurred in the newly minted Republic of Barbados. Do stand by for that conversation.
So it's not a legal schooling. I know you're sensitive to people schooling you on the law, but I think I can trump you when it comes to the history of Grenadas.
What you're saying is that this resignation was expected? Would it be fair to say that you abdicated your responsibility by not showing up in Parliament on Friday?
We are not aware of the terms of the agreement.
But then how can you say the terms are not favorable? You don't know the terms.
We love old talk, we love gossip, we love brango, we love all them kind of things in the Caribbean.
If I cannot play music, I don't know how I'm gonna live.
We are borrowing money to pay debt because of corruption, waste, and mismanagement.
That they have difficulty with your leadership. Why then are you contesting the presidency? And welcome back, folks. I'm happy to be joined now by Mr. Mitchell Nichols, who is a Barbadian citizen, and he's here because we were attempting to obtain a guest to talk about and reflect on Barbados's transition to Republican status. Our previous guest, that's Mr. Downs, had some difficulty in logging on today. But Mr. Nichols, let me get to you, Mitchell. Last year around this time, Barbados removed the Lord Nelson statue from Hero Square. It's ironic that you had a Lord Nelson statue in Hero Square. Lord Nelson was not a hero of Barbados, as far as I know. 1 year later, however, your country removed Lord Nelson's queen as its head of state, right? What was the feeling on the ground last week for those who witnessed this particular moment in history? You need to unmute the microphone there.
There we go.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
There you go. Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Dr. Bubb. Last week was very interesting in that sense, where Bajans are very proud people, and it was filled with pride and excitement. A tad bit of knowing what to expect, especially I guess from the younger folks, because of course this would have been the first time they're experiencing something of this sort. Many were anticipating what would have been some of the changes being made to many of the aspects of Barbados. Of course, the Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Motley, she spoke about some of the changes that would have taken place and some of the plans that were in store for the transition to the Republic. So I think many people waited with bated breath trying to find out, what really will take place, what really will happen. And although the ceremony happened, one can't say anything intrinsically, you felt anything change per se, but beneath it all, many things were, the gears were in motion and many things were changing. Most visible to us was the movement from the Governor General to the President. And of course, you had some names of the public services being changed, like, for example, the Royal Barbados Police Force now became the Barbados Police Service, and other changes, for example, in the flags or the colors of the regiment. So I think many people were really, really excited, and sadly, they couldn't have taken part as they would have liked due to the COVID pandemic.
Now, let us talk about the significance of this moment, as you said, for young Barbadians. Now, there is a school of thought which suggests that the transition to Republican status will not make a material difference in the lives of Barbadians at the end of the day, specifically socioeconomic difference, that this was merely an exercise in window dressing. What are your thoughts on that perspective that was in fact raised by several Bajans? Mitchell, are you hearing me?
Sorry, I had a little difficulty there hearing the last part.
Yeah. So
yes, I'm now hearing you again.
So the question is, do you believe that, that there is a school of thought that this transition to Republican status will not make a material difference in the lives of Barbadians at the end of the day? That this was merely an exercise in window dressing? What are your thoughts? I think we're having some difficulty there.
Yes, we have a little difficulty there.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm now hearing you. Now hearing you.
Okay. What is the significance of this? People are saying that it will not change the lives of average Bajans. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, I don't think it will change in the way they're looking for it or expect it to change. Overnight there will not be some random mystical change and you get up tomorrow and everything's different. But we have made some changes, for example, in the structure of the national knowledge system. And one of the members of Parliament, Sandra Husbands, she outlined very clearly that such a change, for example, in the removal of the knighthoods, for example, and we have the Crown of Merit and the Companion of Honor, those orders that would have been changed, or the awards that would have been changed, the names changed to something more local, you can call it that, gives us an opportunity to reflect on who we are as a people. For example, it's one thing to have dames and sirs and knights, but having a Barbadian recognized for their work locally, receiving an honor instituted by statute locally and not by letters patent out of England, makes the dynamic a little different, where we now identify for ourselves our own icons or models. For example, coming up, you would have heard of certain people, but never really interacted with them before. But now having our own honor system, completely and totally Barbadian, gives us an opportunity now to reflect on all the people that have served Barbados in the years gone by, and how we can therefore use local icons to train and to inspire the youth in the best way to be. You know, if you ask any young person nowadays who's their role model, rarely you would hear somebody local. So changes like that, while they may not be as extravagant and fancy as people would like, these simple changes are very fundamental because it that now we are a nation that governs ourselves entirely, not necessarily from Dominion status in 1966. We now take full responsibility for every aspect of our development, more so than ever before. And it is in those areas that we have the opportunity now to reflect on who we are, nation building, what are our standards and our morals, our values as an independent nation, creating that narrative for ourselves. And that will change the dynamic socially more than people, I think, would expect. It is not an outright change like a pay increase or, you know, or a job change, but these things will affect generations to come.
And just that psychological change as well, right? The psychological impact of that change, I think, must also not be overlooked, right? The idea that you have an unelected white woman as your head of state, where you go into government buildings and you see that white woman there who has no cultural relation to majority Black people in Barbados, right? I think psychologically that does something. Now, finally, last week, Barbados opened the Golden Square Freedom Park, which pays homage to national heroes. And it also unveiled plans to develop a heritage district that will include the construction of a transatlantic slavery museum. Now, can you tell us about the significance of that site at Newton, where all of this will come together?
Well, the Freedom Square, that was the location of the NIS building. And I think the location of it is very integral in that it's in the heart of town. And if you're going most town spaces nowadays, you don't find any green spaces. So that is a place where all Barbadians come into town, whether for to do business or to pass through town to get home, and they can take a moment to go to this location and to, as you said earlier, to reflect on who we are as a people, where we have come from, all the persons that have participated in making Barbados what it is. And I like that it's in the center of Bridgetown. Now, I'm not quite sure if the actual location or spot has a significant history to why that particular location was chosen. However, I know the building that was there before was out of use for quite some time, and the Prime Minister had decided then that that would have been one of the spots earmarked for that development. Going back to what you said before, it is very important, whether it was that site or any other site in the country, that we take the time to acknowledge that, because as you said, we have a queen who never stepped, well, who set foot in Barbados probably in 1974, probably was the last time. The Barbadians don't know who she looks like, you know what she looks like, really who she is, who her family is, why is she entitled to be the monarch of Barbados. So we're so estranged from the monarchy, you know, from our leader, who is not Barbadian, who does not come to Barbados that often, who cannot identify with Barbados. And over the last couple of years, even through CARICOM, we're moving away and having for ourselves the CCJ or UE, having CXC, we take another step to bring everything full circle home. Have an elected president who's local, who contributed to the fabric of the nation. So he or she knows, as they may be in an ivory tower as being president, they know very well what Barbados life is, what it means, and they can set to be the ideal role model to be Barbadian. So here we have Freedom Square Golden Square Freedom Park in the heart of town, reflecting coming as a people where we came from through slavery, emancipation, becoming partially independent in 1966, and coming all the way back to being a sovereign nation all over again. So that is, I think, a remarkable thing, and the location really should beckon people to pay attention and to learn more about their history, because as a Caribbean people, that can be identity is a very iffy topic sometimes.
And it's a complex thing, right? I mean, we are products of several identities, right? And that is because of that period of colonialism and slavery that we endured. But Mitchell, I want to thank you for this opportunity. It's a pity that it's an abbreviated discussion, but certainly we want to congratulate the people of Barbados for making history in this way, and for really prompting the conversation for other Eastern Caribbean countries on the question of republicanism. So thank you again. All right, and that was Mr. Mitchell there from Barbados. And on this note, folks, I want to thank you for staying with us for a very spirited discussion on the Bubb Report today on the just concluded budget debate in the lower house of the Grenada Parliament. As a reminder, the budget debate continues in the Senate from tomorrow, where, of course, we might be hearing some of the same talking points that were raised in the lower house. So again, I wish to thank the panel who participated in this very spirited discussion. We do apologize for the late start, but certainly we were able to get the show on the road regardless. On behalf of my team, on behalf of the hardworking team at the Bubb Report, we thank you for tuning in for today's program, and we will see you next week again for another edition of the Bubb Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kellen Bubb. Bye-bye.